We've been talking a lot lately about getting back together again, about the importance of fellowship, koinonia, community, of being a community of believers interacting with each other, supporting, encouraging, caring for each other. And anytime we use that word fellowship, we've joked that it brings our attention to how much we enjoy eating together. That's the youth group slogan, isn't it? Food, fun, and fellowship. And then we, of course, make sure that we all know that fellowship is more than food and fun. But I've been thinking about it. What's so bad about the food aspect of fellowship? Well, if Jesus has anything to teach us about it, nothing is so bad about the food aspect of fellowship. Unless we overeat or grab that last piece of pie before you know who gets it first. Well, here's something fun to think about seriously. Jesus saw great value in sharing meals with people. The New Testament gives us several occasions on which Jesus was sharing a meal. And as we look at those occasions, we actually see that he did enjoy sharing meals with people, and he very often shared meals with different purposes in mind. Let's look at a couple of them. The first one we find in Mark chapter 2, where Jesus shared a meal to reach sinners. In chapter 2 of Mark, it's the account. In fact, let me read a couple of verses. It happened as he, Jesus, was dining in Matthew's house, that many tax collectors and sinners also sat together with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many, and they followed him. When the scribes and Pharisees saw him eating with the tax collectors and sinners, they said to his disciples, "How is it that he eats and drinks with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard it, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Fellowship, food, to reach sinners. And in this case, at Matthew's house, who was a tax collector. And as we know, the tax collectors, as well as sinners, were highly disregarded, especially by the Pharisees. And yet Jesus chose to eat with tax collectors and sinners in order to build relationship with them, in order to reach them. Later in the New Testament, Luke chapter 14, we see Jesus using eating together to reach the Pharisees. Reading from Luke chapter 14, it happened as he went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread. Did we get that? As he went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread, they watched him closely. Behold, there was a certain man before him who had dropsy. Jesus spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" But they kept silent. He took the man and healed him and let him go. Then he said, "Which of you, having a donkey or an ox that has fallen into a pit, will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day?" And they could not answer him regarding these things. Jesus, having a meal with the Pharisees on the Sabbath day, used it as an opportunity to teach them about what is really important. Later in Luke chapter 24, this is after the resurrection. Jesus, you remember the story of two men on the road to Emmaus, and they're struggling, talking about all the horrible things that had happened. And Jesus ends up walking beside them and opens up the scriptures to them. Check this out as we're at the conclusion of this story on the road to Emmaus, Luke chapter 24. they drew near to the village where they were going. That would be Emmaus. And he indicated, Jesus, that he would have gone farther. But they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it is toward evening. The day is far spent. It's late. Just stay with us." He went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, check this out, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. So Jesus, after the resurrection, is asked by these men to stay with them, and he does, and he's going to have a meal with them. And it was during this meal that through the meal, actually, that he revealed who he was, and they recognized that this was Jesus already having been resurrected. A little bit later in that chapter, we find yet another example of Jesus sharing a meal, this time to reveal himself to the disciples. The disciples are gathered, and they're also talking, trying to figure out what is going on here. And so a little later in Luke chapter 24, we read these words. As they said these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, "Peace to you." They were terrified and frightened and supposed they had seen a spirit. Jesus said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. While they still did not believe, he said to them, "Have you any food here?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Again, Jesus shares a meal to reveal to the disciples, it's me, it's Jesus. And spirits don't eat. Check this out. I'm having a piece of fish and some bread. There's another place later in Revelation 3, very familiar passage of people, where Jesus uses the metaphor of eating to invite his followers to dinner. You remember verse 20 of Revelation chapter 3. "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me." And of course, that dinner that Jesus is referring to is what we refer to as the Feast of the Lamb. Later in the book of Revelation, chapter 19, Jesus said to John the Revelator, who was writing down these words, "Write, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb." So it's true. Food is an okay part of Christian fellowship. Isn't it refreshing that for Jesus anyway, the food part seems to include a higher purpose? Maybe that's some food for thought. What do you think?